morning. I read a story of a couple who went to the theatre to see The Man of La Mancha. And as the production was happening and they were engrossed in it, the fellow was distracted by the woman next to him who was making some noises. And he listened, and she was saying, shh, quiet, you're embarrassing me, and nudging. And he surreptitiously leaned forward and glanced sideways. And he saw this man dressed in a lovely suit and tie, well dressed and well to do, bawling his eyes out, sobbing. And this wife going, shh, quiet, you're embarrassing me. And he was confused. And then he looked back at the stage, and there in centre stage is
Don Quixote
singing to dream the impossible dream. To fight the unfightable foe, to go where no one else has been before, to dream this impossible dream and to live it. And suddenly he realised what this man's problem was. He'd lost his dream. The dreams he'd had faded. Life had overwhelmed him and taken him in other directions, and the dreams were gone. And he suddenly realised this dream, this big dream he had, would never arise. Impossible dreams. I haven't lived through catastrophic situations, and yet I've read about them. They fill our news feeds every day. Stories of warfare and destruction of homes and villages and cities and towns. Bombs and missiles raging everywhere. The chaos, the noise, the confusion, the death, or the catastrophe of a cyclone or tornado or flood or bushfire, the fear, the overwhelming fear and confusion and desperation. And then the kind of grief and loss that is left in the aftermath of people whose lives have been turned upside down, inside out, and have lost everything. I can't really imagine what that's like, or the impossibility of the dreams they must have in those days and weeks afterwards. A dream of everything being rebuilt, returning to some kind of normality. It's an impossible dream, or would seem that way. A couple of stories I read this week. One, 2,500 years old, of people living in exile in Babylon, modern day Iraq, taken there after their city in Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonian armies, ripped apart, armies conquered, city destroyed, temple destroyed, leading citizens and craftspeople and artisans taken off across the desert to Babylon to build and create for that new empire. And then living in this strange place, strange smells and tastes and sights and clothing and language and faith and everything else, all different. And the desperation, the grief, the loss, the confusion that filled their lives. And it was into this that the prophet spoke to people who had lost hope and are questioning even their God. Was God alive or dead? Had God abandoned them? What was their future? And it was prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel and a host of others that spoke into this death and destruction and desolation, this desperation. Of prophets who spoke into the life, the national calamities, the greed and the violence and injustice, inviting the people to walk back into the way of faith, of trust, of hope, of love, of community. And at the end of Isaiah's message, after all the dealing with the pain and the struggle and the abandonment of their faith, he speaks this impossible dream of God. A dream where lions and wolves will sit down and eat together, and the child will be in their midst, and there's snakes, and there's this peaceable kingdom of peace, of hope, of life. A kingdom that no one can imagine, an impossible dream. And yet it's this world, this dream of God that we hold and we have. We can't quite grasp or believe sometimes, but it leads us on. A world where people have enough food to eat, everyone. Where there's clean water and good sanitation for everyone, and health care that they need. That everyone has a house to live in and clothes to wear. Where women and children, and particularly girls, are not walking kilometres each day to find clean water for their families and losing out on education. A world where women can walk through the streets of the city safely, whether it's day or night, without fear of violence or rape or being ogled or looked at in obsessive and strange ways, but valued for who they are. Where young men don't have to prove themselves in stupid ways, but can be valued as people and can strive to be people of love and courage and justice and hope. Where people can live together despite the differences of culture and religion and politics and skin colour and language and gender and sexual orientation and capacity and ability and disability and health and mental health and all the rest of the things that separate us and divide us and make us out as different. Where we can bring the best of who we are to the table and share the goodness of all people. And a world where we can live together with the creatures of the earth, all the beauty and wonder, and care for them, and be stewards of creation, caring for it, and holding its resources valuably and preciously and carefully, especially for our children and their children and their children's children. To live in a world that flourishes gently and cares for one another in the world. This is the impossible dream of God, where there aren't wars and conflicts, or where conflicts and differences of opinion are settled through reconciliation, listening and understanding and compromise and sharing. A world where there's not violence and greed, where people don't accumulate too much or lust after more and more wealth and power and use it badly, unjustly. A world where people use power for good and share their wealth. There would be no trillionaires because they would give money away where it's needed. This is an impossible dream, but it's the dream of God. And it's the dream that Isaiah gives to the people, to be a light in the world and show a new way of being. And it's a light we receive and we're invited into if we're game, if we're willing. In the other story, a couple of thousand years ago, a story that Luke tells using Jesus' stories earlier on, and 55 years later in his own community, after the temple in Jerusalem has been destroyed, after that war between the Jews and the Romans in Jerusalem, Luke speaks of this temple that will be pulled down. But Jesus' words about there'll be wars and rumours of wars and conflicts, and there'll be those who rise up to lead falsely and badly. But you remain strong. Bring out the message of love and life and hope in the midst of war, conflict, confusion, deathliness, greed and violence. Be people of love and hope and justice. It will take great courage. It will take great resilience. And people will curse you and abuse you and will persecute you. But stay strong, because I am with you. The love and the grace of God will sustain you. And what our world needs as we lead now, getting closer to Christmas, is that message of hope and people of hope. People have the capacity, the courage and the grace to live hopefully, peacefully, lovingly, justly in our world, and to show the world how it can be. That's what we need. And bringing all of our diversity and wonder together, all of our knowledge and our skills and our experience and wisdom, bring it together and share it, that we may build a world that fills this impossible dream of God and lives into it. Will you join this impossible dream? Will you dream what can be in God's dream and live out of it? Because that's what's going to make a difference in our world. God be with you.